What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the Fantasy Alarm Quick Out Podcast. Thanks to you for joining us here on stream. And if you're one of our listeners that doesn't watch the video or watch live, you might not notice that John and Pemba once again not here this week. Instead, we have a special guest filling in. You can hear his chuckling in the background. Our own Howard Bender, the guy that makes Fantasy Alarm run. Howard, how you doing, buddy? How was your 4th of July?
I spent my 4th of July exactly in this spot right here. A little alarm fantasy football, which will be coming up in the next hour as well with you, me, and Britt. Yesterday it was just me and Britt. And then it was just a little DFS live stream, little Sirius XM show. And then I spent the rest of the night holding my poor, shaking like a leaf dog, one of them, who just doesn't dig the fireworks. So yeah, that was my 4th of July. We grilled up some chicken, some corn on the cob, sliced up some watermelon for dessert. How about you? How was yours?
Mine was great, man. I got a rare day off. We went down to Mystic, Connecticut. I will say with the dogs and the fireworks thing, and at the risk of sounding un-American, I don't really like fireworks, man. Especially the like homemade ones. Like, if it's gonna be professionally done, great, but it just seems a little too high risk, low reward for me. The firing off drunken fireworks in the backyard over your pool. I don't know, Howard, how you feel about that.
I mean, you know what? I was a little disappointed to not see some video on social media today of somebody blowing up their car or setting their bushes on fire, like something busted into the garage door and lighting everything up there. I kind of bummed that we didn't get that. It was like nobody broke the record in the hot dog eating contest. No, day after firework disaster videos. So let's move on.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. It was a down year for 4th of July shenanigans. But the good news is last week we had a bit of a down week on this show with the AFC South. Not super exciting. This week, Howard, since it's your last one before John comes back, I decided to reward you a little bit with a fun division, the NFC East. You get to talk about the Cowboys without Jim Bowden, right?
Well, you know how much I love that.
Without
I love
Jim,
talking Cowboys.
That's the caveat, though. You get to do it. You're on your own terms here. No Britt, no Ronus, no Jim. We got the Eagles, we got the Giants. So why don't we get into it? So let's get the big team pulled up first. You got to give respect, give the flowers to the Philadelphia Eagles. They made it to the Super Bowl last year, Earn Dog, if you pull that up. 2022 record, 14-3. The best ad this offseason, in my opinion, was Nolan Smith, but I'll go as far as saying that the best draft pick was Jalen Carter, who they got a couple later in the first round. People expected them to take him at the spot where they took Nolan Smith. He slid. They got both. Unbelievable, considering one of their biggest losses was defensive tackle Javon Hargrave. He goes over to join an already formidable 49ers defense. Vegas win total set at 11.5, minus 110. Odds to win the AFC East, pretty heavy favorites there at minus 165. And Super Bowl odds, one of the top couple teams at plus 650. I believe right now only the Chiefs are higher. Bills are pretty close. So, a lot of movement for this team this offseason. Those ones there weren't the only transactions. I'll rattle them quick, Howard. I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether this team is the same team we were looking at, better, worse. So they did get, we bailed them out in the first round, letting them get Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter. Unbelievable that they were able to get those guys after losing Javon Hargrave, losing TJ Edwards to Chicago. They lost CJ Gardner-Johnson to Detroit. They lost Miles Sanders to Carolina. And then they kind of, pieced together Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift, added Alameda Zakaya. So some losses on defense, but the draft really helped them out there, Howard. How are you feeling about this team?
I mean, that was the thing, is that the draft really gave them a nice boost. It's exactly what they needed to do, shoring up that defense. I mean, come on, Jalen Carter. I mean, the fact that the NFL gift wrapped Jalen Carter for them was just unbelievable. I mean, he was one of the top defensive linemen, in the draft. So to see them, end up with that was a great move. Listen, there's a lot to like about the Eagles. Obviously, there are some changes. I don't think they've upgraded at the running back position. I feel like they took a little bit of a downgrade there, going to Swift and going to Rashad Penny to kind of I mean, I feel like it's like two of the same guys.
Yeah.
Injury prone, pass catching running backs, and they don't really have anybody to take it between the tackles. I mean, unless they're really going to have Boston Scott kind of squirrel his way through, because they still have Kenneth Gainwell, who turns out to be predominantly a pass catching running back too. So, and they also, by the way, they lost their offensive coordinator. They promoted from within. So I don't see anything. I don't see anything changing. I think it's still Nick Sirianni's West Coast style offense, but Brian Johnson, taking over, and it's going to be interesting to see what that dynamic looks like for the Eagles. But the core of this team, the Jalen Hurts with Devonta Smith and AJ Brown, Dallas Goedert at the tight end, like the core of their offense is still intact, working in the same system and feeding off of last year's momentum for sure.
And lucky that they got, because last year wasn't like this year, because they didn't come out from the Super Bowl, and they convinced a lot of those guys to come back last year. Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson, they were on the fence, really. Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, like they've done a great job of convincing these guys 2 years in a row to buy in and say, we're going to do it. If they do have a down year, you can see a lot of those guys go. Not to mention, they did convince, James Bradbury and Darius Slay, both sending out, classic cryptic defensive back tweets all offseason before
Always.
Finally, all nonstop. They probably had them scheduled. Like they probably don't even, right at the season ends, they're like, let me just schedule a bunch of cryptic tweets and then they get paid. But it works out nice for them. And, you mentioned they lost their offensive coordinator. They lost defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon as well. And, there was some tampering charges with him going to the Cardinals. So had to give up a little bit in terms of picks. But at the end of the day, I look at it kind of a similar team. So let's look at fantasy. Then we'll check out some betting. For fantasy, AJ Brown, ADP 9, wide receiver 6. I've seen him go in the second round maybe once or twice, Howard. Have you seen him fall to the second?
No, actually, I haven't. I mean, I'm trying to think back to maybe an early June draft, late May. But no, I haven't seen him slip down. I think everybody's got the usual expectations of him. He's I'm surprised that I have seen him go as high as like 5th or 6th in some drafts, but I consider him, a back end of the first round type guy.
Yeah, he's locked in there. So in your hometown leagues, just expect him to be gone. In the second round, we have Devonta Smith going, pick 21, wide receiver 13. Jalen Hurts also goes pick 25, QB2. Seen him go in the second round, a lot of best ball, but probably in your hometown leagues where you don't have to draft 2 or 3 QBs, he's going to go a little bit later, probably the third round or maybe even the fourth. Dallas Goedert, ADP 75, tight end 6. DeAndre Swift still going ADP 79, RB 23. Wonder if maybe that's a bit of a hangover from ADP from before the moves. Rashad Penny, ADP 116, RB 38. Kenneth Gainwell, 171, RB 53. And then the rest of the guys going outside the 200. Sometimes you see a little Quez Watkins or Boston Scott, Olamide Zacchaeus, but not really going. It's really the big dogs, as you mentioned. So to kick this one off, Howard, the first thing I want to ask is, if you were going to draft one of these running backs, Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Gainwell, especially considering ADP, who would you take a stab on if you were going to, or if you're just
I've actually picked up Kenneth Gainwell in several spots because I mean he's practically a free pick. I'm grabbing him 13th round, 14th round. Nobody's touching Kenneth Gainwell because everybody's eyeballing Swift and Penny. But I mean, we've got 2 of the more injury-prone guys out there. There's a reason that DeAndre Swift, I think that this is the big thing that everybody forgets. There's a reason he was phased out in Detroit. And, he doesn't go between the tackles. He's undersized. He does catch passes well, and I'm sure that he's perfectly fine when he's running out in space and nobody's touching him. But, what kind of yards after contact are we looking at for a guy like Swift? And the fact that he does get hurt as often as he does, we see this with a lot of the undersized pass catching backs. You can look at guys like Darren Sproles and Gio Bernard and Danny Woodhead. to just kind of rattle out a few of them. These guys always get banged up.
Yeah.
There's a reason Rashad Penny is weak in the knees. So
Raheem Mostert, another one every
Raheem
year.
Mostert,
right?
yeah, another one. So, for these two guys, based on where their ADPs go, and I'm perfectly fine grabbing running backs earlier in the draft and then using those, third, fourth, fifth round picks of bulking up my wide receiver core, as opposed to, hoping that I can get some pass catching back that's may or may not stay healthy. So, and again, because of their injury history, you grab Kenneth Gainwell there at the tail end of your draft. He doesn't really have to do much to start getting work. We've already seen Sirianni mix him in a lot more. He got mixed in a lot more than I had expected, even last year with Miles Sanders having such a great year. So Gainwell's probably the only one out of this backfield that I will ever have in fantasy this year.
And he's interesting because he oddly scores from outside the 20 fairly often, or even outside the 10. Like he can break them off. He looks good on tape. And to your point there, Howard, our own Kevin Tompkins just wrote an article in the Draft Guide, an amazing article. A guy that's been doing zero RB for a long time and has seen all the mistakes. He's figured everything out on that. He just wrote about ambiguous situations, and this one to me about as ambiguous as you can get, and you want to go after the third guy there. So everybody out there, if you haven't grabbed the Draft Guide yet, that's up fantasyalarm.com/NFL Draft Guide. And right now, if you want to get a free preview of that, 7 days, you can sign up for a membership, 6 months, 50% off, and use promo code Howard in honor of our illustrious guest. You can see everything behind the paywall, not just the fantasy football stuff, but the baseball stuff, the DFS stuff. You can check out the Discord. You can check everything out. So get in there, check that out now. As far as the pass catchers, Howard, I did want to ask you, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, we talked to death about how we love these two guys, both because of how highly consolidated it is, how you can get a discount on Devonta Smith because he's the wide receiver too. But Dallas Goedert at tight end 6, do you find yourself taking him often there? To me, it's kind of a question of, do you want the safest possible guy that doesn't have great upside and you take a guy like that, or does he just not offer enough upside for you? Where are you at with Goddard?
No, listen, I like him. He's nice, but he's third on that target receiving list. And there's not really a whole lot that as far as value goes, based on his ADP and based on where he's going in drafts. I look at him like I kind of look at Kyle Pitts at this point. It's not a knock on them. It's just the fact that, the targets are good. They're not great. The red zone touches are good. They're not great. And if I'm going to pay up for a tight end, and it's not going to be Kelsey, to me, it's all kind of interchangeable. So, listen, you and I have talked about tight ends over and over again. And I think we're both of that mindset that if I'm in the back end of that first round and I grab myself Travis Kelsey, okay, great. That's fine. If I don't, I'll keep waiting. Let everybody else, let everybody sit there in the third, fourth, fifth round, reach for those tight ends who are like the third or fourth target on their team. I'll happily turn around and just take somebody like Okonkwo, who we know is the number 2 target on his team, and he's going to give you a 5-round discount off of that. So that's still where I'm at there with Goddard. I respect the game. I like what he does, but there's nothing about him that really dazzles me to think that, tight end 6, got to have him.
I'm fully with it, man. Exactly. Like, you need that upside if you're going to go tight ends. If I'm drafting a guy tight end 6, he needs to have the upside of tight end 1 or 2. And to me, it feels almost like drafting a handcuff plus running back, like an AJ Dillon or something, where I say, oh, I'll start this guy, and if someone gets hurt, now I get upside. I just don't like spending that kind of pick on that, right? Like, where for him to truly be the guy that we want him to be, or to be unlocked, he needs one of the wide receivers to go down. I'd rather let someone else draft him, and then if one of those guys does get hurt, I try and overpay for him before the person who has him realizes what's really happening. Right. But yeah, for the time being, I'm not going to settle like that. Only one team wins the league.
But so. I think you make a great point when you say, if I'm grabbing tight end 6, it's because I do think that he has that possibility to be tight end 2. I'm not going to say tight end 1 because he's not going to be Kelsey. He's never going to be Kelsey.
Forget Kelsey. He's mythical, right? He doesn't count.
And so if I'm looking for a tight end who's going to return a strong draft value, give me tight end 11 or 12 who has the potential of being tight end 5. Yes. That's where your bread and butter is. It's not overpaying for a guy like Dallas Goedert who's going to get you good numbers, but there's nothing that separates it. And you're not getting any kind of a clear advantage at the position by taking him where he's going.
Bingo. And I'll tell you this, a little teaser for later in the show. There is a tight end in this division that is being drafted around the same area that I do feel that way about. So we'll get to that eventually. But before that, let's wrap up this team by hitting on some bets. Let's see where we're laying our money or not on this squad. Super Bowl plus 650. Howard, how do you feel about it?
I mean, yeah, listen, I think it's so much more wide open in the NFC that I don't really see an issue. If you want to sprinkle a little something on these guys, I think what I think the over on their win total is perfectly fine. The 11.5. You're telling me that this team can't win 12 or 13 games in a 17 game season? I think I could do that. Super Bowl odds at plus 650. Sure, why not? Put a half unit on it. I'm not going to break the bank for that either. And then it's the division odds. They're at minus 165. To me, there's just no value in that, or there's limited value in that. And we can shout it out to Corey Parson from the Better Sport from the Better Morning Show and be like, "What? These guys have the same odds as the Jacksonville Jaguars? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
$1.65. Yeah, like
you want to win $1.65 doing that?
I'm not going there on that one. One that I do like, especially if we like the Super Bowl and the over under, is Jalen Hurts MVP plus 1100. A lot of people, I think, if he wasn't an injury prone player, then that would be lower, right? Like I think that he was on an MVP pace last year before he got hurt. So that's what I do like that one. Here's what else we got. AJ Brown MVP, probably not going to happen, plus 15,000. Two really interesting ones here. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Jalen Carter plus 650. That's the second best odds. Nolan Smith plus 1,600. That's also top 8. So this team, coming off the Super Bowl, we let them get 2 players that are both in the top 8 for Rookie of the Year for defense, which is crazy. Either of those you interested in, Jalen Carter or Nolan Smith?
I like the Jalen Carter call at plus 650. I think that's fine. I think Nolan Smith, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with him. If offenses focus heavily on making sure that Jalen Carter doesn't disrupt them too much at the defensive line, then I think that Nolan Smith could end up being the surprise pick there. But yeah, I mean, at plus 1,600, I'm not really, I don't know. Yeah. I'm not going to do it. I've done it. To me, you need a guy who's really going to stand out. Like when Micah Parsons got drafted, right? And I was like, this is a guy who, based on landing spot, based on, his potential role in the offense, based on his playmaking abilities, I was like, this is a guy who I could bet on for Defensive Rookie of the Year. And Adam Ronis and I actually did that in the FSGA Sportsbook props bet league that we did, and we ended up winning that year. Just and Micah Parsons winning the award was a huge part of that. So I'd probably lean Jalen Carter as the more marquee name out of this, but I mean, again, neither really excites me enough to say, yeah, I got to bet this.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like with Micah Parsons, he plays a role where he can stack the stats at every position. The stuff that we like to see, right? All these tackles, the sacks, the interceptions. At defensive tackle, like I know they use Javon Hargrave like that, but you have to be very disruptive to be the guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm with you. Yeah, I checked out a couple other special props. One of them, there's some AJ Brown ones that are interesting. He almost had 1,500 yards last year. You can get plus 600 to bet that. Or AJ Brown, 8 plus 100-yard games in the regular season at plus 110. Last year he had 5, but he had games of 95, 95, and 97 yards. I don't love betting those, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to see what's outside the box on these.
I mean, super plausible, no doubt
Yeah.
about it. Super plausible, but yeah, I mean, I think that with so many fluky things, how'd you like to be on that prop and like all of a sudden you end up losing because he takes a pass out in the flat for like -2 yards and he misses his 100-yard game.
Oh
I mean,
my God.
you're just setting yourself up for that to happen. That's
That that
more than
happened.
plausible.
That happened to a Falcons player once, like it was like 20 years ago or something. He had a 1,000-yard season, and they brought everybody out onto the field, and then
Mhm.
2 plays later, he had a negative run play and finished with 997. They had like a whole celebration and everything. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to the next team here. Let's get to the Dallas Cowboys, and we can talk about them today without the other fantasy alarm Dallas Cowboys homers interrupting us. Let's get the graphic up there. 2022 record 12-5. Best ad, in my opinion, is the cornerback Stephon Gilmore, but they also made a couple other ads we'll talk about. So we can see on that. Big loss for them. Tight end Dalton Schultz, say what you will. He was good for 100 plus targets for this team multiple years in a row. Best draft pick, DT Mazzie Smith in the first round. Vegas win total 9.5 wins, -165. Not really giving us much help there. NFC odds +190. Super Bowl odds +1,400. Just on that list, quick, Howard, I want to ask. I put this together, the show there. I wasn't
Mhm.
sure if it should be Brandon Cooks or Stephon Gilmore as the best ad. Which one do you think is most impactful for this team?
I mean, from a fantasy standpoint, Brandon Cooks, but from
Of
a
course.
reality standpoint, Stephon Gilmore, that's a huge, huge get for them. You've got Gilmore will be on one side, you've got Trevon Diggs on the other. We already saw teams stopping. I mean, listen, you can throw deep on Trevon Diggs. He's that aggressive of a cornerback. But for the same token, he's also one of the toughest. And we started to see some teams last year throwing away from him instead of, and trying to challenge him. Yes, there every once in a while you'll see somebody slip through and he gets beaten deep. But now that you've got Stephon Gilmore on the other side, I think that becomes a little bit more of an intriguing factor. You're not going to have to float safety help over to that side as much. And I do think that this is going to be a problem for teams who fall behind against Dallas and they start going into like a shutdown defensive mode. They've got a fantastic pass rush. They can cover, they can cover receivers. They've got speed at the linebacker position where they can cover those underneath routes without having to get the safeties to pull up that much in order to do it. So yeah, I think that the Gilmore ad really kind of transforms their defense, or at least their secondary, to a point where it is. I think that's going to be much more impactful than Cooks, who listen. I think Cooks is going to be great. Yeah, mark down Cooks for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns this year, with the fact that all the attention is going to be on CeeDee Lamb. But that's from a fantasy standpoint, fantasy angle only. Reality, Gilmore.
Exactly. And the difference is, it'd be one thing if Brandon Cooks was coming in to be the number one guy, but I love the point you made about Gilmore being able to lock guys down, because now Diggs doesn't have to cover the top dog anymore, right?
Right.
You put Gilmore on the top guy and you throw Diggs on the other side and say, hey, do what you do best and just try and get your hands on the football, right? Because that's what he's good at. He's
Yeah,
good
and you
at
got the safety over the
the
top
safety
on
over the
him
top.
to watch him getting beaten deep.
It's smart, man. It's smart because because I say what you will about it, he does take a lot of chances. He reminds me a lot of Asante Samuel Senior, not Junior, but Senior he used to pick six it all the time, but it would either be a pick six or a touchdown the other way. Which
Right.
Diggs is that guy. Much better setup for him. We mentioned they lost Dalton Schultz. They also released Zeke Elliott over contract concerns, similar to releasing Amari Cooper. Then the draft, they went out, got we mentioned Mazzie Smith. They got a tight end, Luke Schoonmaker, and they drafted Deuce Vaughn, a running back who is also the son of a scout on the team. So not it's kind of the same old team it was. A couple moves. I mean, the Gilmore one huge. Cooks helps out, but they're bringing back a very similar team to what they had last year, and that team was double-digit win team. So feeling pretty good about this squad. Would you bet or we'll get to over under this in a minute. Let's hit some fantasy first. Quick fantasy rundown. CeeDee Lamb going in the first round, sometimes early second. ADP 11, wide receiver 7. Tony Pollard, ADP 22. He's RB 7. Brandon Cooks, 84, wide receiver 43. Then you got Dak Prescott going pick 104, QB 12. Michael Gallup, ADP 133, wide receiver 61. The rest of these guys not really being drafted. Jake Ferguson, Malik Davis, Deuce Vaughn, Luke Schoonmaker. We love CeeDee Lamb. He's the cover of the Fantasy Lard draft guide for a reason. Kind of a unanimous pick we like. Tony Pollard, Howard, it's been tough to be in on him, but
yeah, I mean, it depends on where I am. Like if I'm picking in the beginning of the draft and I, like really early on and I get, Chase or Jefferson, or even, if I land like a Cooper Kupp or an AJ Brown, and coming back around in that late second round, if Tony Pollard's there and I don't really see any other running backs who like really do it for me. But I think the problem is that Tony Pollard's value is going to take a hit when we see who else Dallas brings in. Deuce Vaughn it was a nice little draft moment so that they could have like a little heartstring kind of video over there. But they need to either bring back Zeke or add Fournette. They need somebody who's going to be able to take it between the tackles, because without that, Tony Pollard's going to take a beating, and he's going to end up getting hurt. So I'll grab him late second round if I don't see Nick Chubb sitting there available to me in the late second. If somebody grabs him beforehand, then I kind of give a look to Tony Pollard. But again, not a guy who I love.
Bingo. I find myself taking him in the third just because that group there's a lot of studs in there, honestly, the way it's falling. Like you said, Nick Chubb's there, Ramondre Stevenson, Josh Jacobs. It's kind of, I find myself maybe taking the wide receiver and taking whoever's left. That's when I end up with Pollard. And Dustin points out in the chat, good point here, a slightly new team with a new OC. To your point, Howard, Mike McCarthy all offseason has been banging the drum for running the football, even going as far as to say that he believes Kellen Moore was scoring too fast, too quickly, being too much of a gunslinger, not giving the defense time to rest. If that's Mike McCarthy's plan, they're going to need more running backs. What they have now is one of the thinner running back groups. And Deuce Vaughn's your RB3 at 5'6" or whatever size he is. Not one of these guys really is the bruiser they need. So I'm with you that I think.
And they brought in Brian Schottenheimer, and Schottenheimer is not a guy. I mean, he does like to run the ball a little bit. He uses an Air Coryell system that is normally, predicated on the run setting up the pass, but they don't have that guy, in that role, which is, again, what I'm kind of curious to see how they end up doing it. I genuinely feel like that would be the take that tilts more towards McCarthy, where you get you have the pass and you let that set up the run, and you grind out the clock and you do it that way. We'll see.
I mean, it's funny though. It's like, it seems like everyone's just ignoring what he's saying, right? Because if you look at Vegas, his the over under for yardage for Dak Prescott set at 4,000. That's the highest for this division. Higher than Jalen Hurts is like 3,700. Daniel Jones is only like 3,300. I don't even think you can get odds on the Washington QB because we don't know who it is yet, but we'll get to that. But
Sammy, come on, it's Sammy.
We'll see.
Isn't it Sammy?
It probably will be. I think they told everybody that whoever is coming in, it would be the guy. But anyway, let's hit some of the betting. First one, Dak Prescott. I just mentioned it. 4,050 yards over under, plus 100 or minus 120 to bet the under.
I don't mind the minus 120 on the under there. I definitely, again, I don't think I think that Schottenheimer will make it exciting. It's really going to depend. Can Dak Prescott hit both Lamb and Cooks in stride? Like that's the whole thing with Air Coryell. You're not throwing it at the receiver. You're throwing it to a spot on the field, and the receiver is expected to be there. So if he's got the timing down, then I do think that he can go over. But you always have to sit and kind of watch and wait and see, especially when you're getting a new coordinator in there who, doesn't exactly scream, me and the head coach are one and the same
page. Yeah. And, you got the coach saying one thing, and then the ultimate tiebreaker really for this season long total bets is this a guy that can stay healthy? And with Dak Prescott, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard on that front. So, I'm there with that. Cowboys Super Bowl plus 1,400. Feels about right. Which I don't like. I don't like when the lines. When I look at a line and I say that looks right, it doesn't make me want to bet it either way.
I don't mind them for the division at plus 190.
Yes, I think
I
that's
think
the one I like
anything
best.
can happen in here. And again, we're going to have to wait and see because the NFC East, their out of conference schedule puts them against the AFC East this year. So it's going to be a kind of a tougher schedule. And I genuinely feel like that's going to tighten things up a little bit more in the division. I don't think we're going to have a runaway. So to see Dallas at plus 190, and listen, if you say anything to Jim Bowden that I said this, I will cut you. And the
You
world will
know,
never hear from you again, Coop. I know where you live.
how
So I'm just saying,
you know
don't tell
100%.
Jim.
100% when I next time I'm on the show that I will bring that up. Maybe I'll
And
even
if you say something, don't say anything to Britt on the next show either. I swear
I'm
I will cut you, man.
I'm having Earn Dog clip this and send it to Shannon Blunt as we speak. This is this is going in the sound bank for your show later today.
Don't do it, Ern. Don't do it.
Yeah. So Dak MVP plus 2,000. I don't know. The one we do like is our boy Parsons on defense, defensive player of the year. He's a favorite, but still to get it plus 650. No, I kind of like that. I kind of like the sound of
Parsons
that.
at plus 650. Okay.
Yeah, plus
you got a different number in that show, Doc, my friend.
What do I have in there? Oh no, so that was the Parsons for MVP is plus 1,500.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that's his MVP. If you think he's just going to go absolutely Lawrence Taylor, then you bet that. But defensive player of the year, that's an interesting one, plus 650.
Yeah, I mean, defensive player of the year plus 650. Yes, that I can see happening. Again, when you've got the secondary now that the Cowboys do have, it's going to free up Micah Parsons to, really do some damage in the backfield, I think. So I don't mind that defensive player of the year at plus 650 for Parsons. Yeah.
Yeah. So Magic Smith, we're not going to bet him for defensive player of the year.
No.
Sorry, Jim. I was looking through some of the numbers for some specials. One that I thought usually they're all sucker bets. This one's kind of interesting. One of CeeDee Lamb or Tony Pollard to have 1,750 scrimmage yards plus 300. I can't bet it now, but closer to the season could be something entertaining.
1,750 seems a little
lot
for me. I mean, especially because you're not, you look at CeeDee Lamb, 1,500 yards is at plus 650. So now all of a sudden, what you've got an either or here, and so that odds just go to plus 300. If you don't think CeeDee Lamb is going to get to 1,500 yards, right? If you're not betting that at plus 650, then you're certainly not betting this because Tony Pollard is not going to do enough rushing and receiving. What's he going to do? 900 yards each? No.
Yeah, you're better off just honestly if you're gonna rather than place that bet, just draft these guys in fantasy. So that's the way it goes there. Yeah. So we're gonna hit on the last two teams in this division. We're gonna hit on the Washington Commanders and the New York Giants. First, let's hear a little something quick from our buddies over at RT Sports.
Yeah.
My first bust is going to be Davante Adams. There's two reasons why I'm going to be avoiding him. One, his age, and one, his QB situation. First off, his age. He's going to be turning 31 this year. There's only two wide receivers in all of football that are 31 or older and having production like top tier production in the top 50 wide receiver rankings, and that's DeAndre Hopkins and Keenan Allen. Those are the only two wide receivers that are older than him ranked in the top 50, and both of those have been struggling with injuries. So the injury bug might be coming towards Davante Adams just with that age, so that's definitely a concern for me. And then his second situation is with the QB with Derek Carr being gone and Jimmy Garoppolo taking over. Garoppolo doesn't target downfield as much. He's more of those quick, short passes, release the ball quickly. So that's definitely a concern for Adams, especially with he relies so much what he did in Green Bay with his touchdowns. And he's currently being drafted at 17 for his ADP, so that's a bit too high of a price for me to pay for him.
Yeah, definitely a high price if you want to get Adams. I can totally understand why you would be fading him. I actually have a former teammate of Adams as my first bust, and that is New York Giants tight end Darren Waller. He was dealt to the Giants this offseason, takes over as their starting tight end. My issue with Waller is he just can't stay healthy. He's played just 20 games the last two seasons because of various injuries. Now he moves to a new offense, an offense that's not going to throw quite as much as Las Vegas did. I think you could see less targets. Waller might still have a decent season, but I'm expecting his numbers to be up and down, especially compared to past years, and I just have a hard time expecting consistency from him in a move to a new offense, and with his injury issues of the past, I'm just letting somebody else deal with him. I don't think he's worth the risk.
Just joshing. I'm spending this holiday locked in. My body got rid of them toxins. Sports in the top 10. Calling my tell her bring me that.
I gotta tell you, man, we got to bring in Jeff Power from RT Sports in here. He's like all down on guys who I like. I need to.
He's crushing
with him.
He's crushing some of our guys. We gotta send him a draft guide. We gotta get him in on that. That'll square him up. That'll fix him right up. Anyway, we're hitting those jumping in late. We're hitting the NFC East, a powerful division that we decided to do for Howard Bender, our guest, joining us today because John Mpemba is out. Of course, I am Andrew Cooper. Let's get into the Washington Commanders, newly acquired Washington Commanders from the evil Dan Snyder, who is now gone. Last year, 2022 record 8-1. They didn't make too many adds this offseason, but adding Jacoby Brissett gives them a viable option after Sam Howell. Biggest loss is Cole Holcomb, in my opinion, a guy that, over 200 solo tackles the last few years, just a huge part of that defense. They picked up Emmanuel Forbes, one of the best cornerbacks in this draft, got him at a viable spot. Vegas win total has him at 6.5. So not a lot of love there. NFC East odds plus 1,200. Super Bowl odds plus 6,500 there. Other offseason moves, again, really not too much. Drafted Emmanuel Forbes. They drafted Jartavius Martin, signed Jacoby Brissett, lost Cole Holcomb. Other just kind of minor housekeeping moves as they kept most of their offense intact. Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, the running back group. They brought Logan Thomas back. I don't know, Howard. To me, it kind of feels like this team is just kind of in limbo as they wait for this new ownership group to come in and put their stamp on things. Do you think the Commanders can do any damage this year, or is it kind of just like, hey, out with the old, in with the new?
It's going to be really interesting. I think the most telling thing for the Washington Commanders this year was their biggest offseason acquisition, and that was Eric Bieniemy. Bieniemy's coming in. He's now going to be the offensive coordinator. We're going to see what Bieniemy looks like as an OC when he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes, and that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. You add in a guy like Jacoby Brissett who can scramble. He is mobile, and so maybe if you don't have confidence in the offensive line holding up, at least you've got Brissett who's decent at scrambling, and maybe that's the throwing on the run that we've seen Mahomes do in the past. But I mean, Mahomes does so much for that Chiefs offense that this is going to be a really, really interesting season. I wanted the backfield, and I saw it in the chat earlier. Who was it? Urena.
Urena.
So Yuri hits us up and asks us thoughts on the Robinson-Gibson duo. It's kind of interesting because if Bieniemy is really going to do the traditional Andy Reid style offense, that's a lot of pass catching running back work. That's not Brian Robinson's A game. That is Antonio Gibson's game. But Gibson has been. I know Britt Flynn was throwing out some stuff on Alarm Fantasy Football yesterday's show. Where Gibson finished up in his first 2 seasons, but he ended up at like RB 28 last year. And the question is he going to get that pass catching work? Are they legitimately going to do that and put that offense into play? And that's
it's gonna be everything. It's gonna be everything for the value.
Everything, yeah. But I mean, I'll still lean Robinson on just the short yardage back, who's probably going to get those goal line touches over Antonio Gibson, who we've seen get stuffed at the goal line time and time again. So,
right. That's the question, is like, how good is Brian Robinson? Because we do lean into the pass catching backs and we get a little too carried away with it, sometimes, because every once in a while it is the other guy, right? Alfred Morris for this very team had a monster year, did he not? Like, early on, hey, say what you will. Early on, he was scoring a lot of touchdowns and he was doing that home run swing celebration, and we all love him. It wasn't until later, like your guy Jordan Howard, he had his moment. So did Jeremy Hill. Like there are guys that can come out. Like Garrett Blunt scored 18 touchdowns and he caught 7 passes, right? Like it's possible for these guys to come out and have those years, but the offense needs to be in place. If a 6.5 win team, I actually personally probably am going to lean into Antonio Gibson just because JD McKissick's not walking through that door. They have nobody else unless maybe they do the Curtis Samuel at running back move that Ron Rivera loves so much.
The wide back roll.
He had 40 carries that one year, 2020 for Riverboat Ron. CMC got hurt, but still, I don't know. It's a very strange offense. Let's hit some ADPs, and I want to hear your thoughts on some of these pass catchers because, boy, it's kind of interesting. So you have Terry McLaurin going off the board at ADP 44, wide receiver 24, so just barely a wide receiver 2, and he's the first player being drafted for this team. No players being drafted in the first 3 rounds. McLaurin's the first guy. And you have Jahan Dotson, ADP 74, wide receiver 39. So now we're talking not even a wide receiver 3, the wide receiver 4 range. That's their second best player in terms of ADP. Yeah, Antonio Gibson at 100, RB 32. Brian Robinson, 111, RB 36. Curtis Samuel, 173 at wide receiver 75. So he's basically free. And then Sam Howell gets drafted at ADP 194, QB 27. This is underdog, so 2 to 3 QB leagues. After that, it's Logan Thomas, Jacoby Brissett with a very last round pick if you're interested. But McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel, Howard, you feeling it?
I don't mind McLaurin at wide receiver 24. I mean, he's got the potential of being a top 15 wide receiver in the league. Extremely talented, can stretch the field. The question is can Dotson do enough to occupy other coverage? That's been the thing for poor Terry McLaurin is that they've never put a decent decent receiver on the other side of him. So he's getting the double team or he's getting the safety help floating over in his direction. And it becomes a little bit of an issue. I still think I love the talent. I really do love the talent for McLaurin. So I have no problem taking him. And the fact that, his ADP is sitting at 44 right now means that he's not your wide receiver 1. He could actually be your wide receiver 3 on your team, depending on how you draft it. If you're telling me that Terry McLaurin is my third wide receiver,
4th round,
I feel pretty good about that.
It's not crazy. I mean, he's wide receiver 24, so that's right at the edge of the wide receiver 3 range. And in the 4th round, you could draft 1 running back and 3 wide receivers. It's entirely possible. So yeah, Jahan Dotson, I like. He is an end zone threat. Scored a lot of touchdowns, especially right away. First few games there, man, he was unstoppable in the end zone. But those guys can end up being touchdown dependent. Maybe. Best ball standard. That's where I look for a guy like that, especially standard if it's, if that's what you play. But Terry McLaurin, him and Deontay Johnson just feel like.
That's what you play. Wait, you don't like standard leagues? Come on.
Howard, let's not. We only have so much time. We only have so much time.
I will die on the hill that says we don't need PPR
I know,
anymore.
buddy. I know.
There's no shame in the fact that you won your game 56-44. There's no shame in that.
I will play a standard league if you fully commit to the idea that now we are doing it. Well, we shouldn't be, but we are. I will fully commit to a standard league if you've said to yourself, "Hey, I want this to be most like real football as possible," and then you have stuff for like I love when leagues like that add like points for first downs or like points for stops on 4th down for defenses or little things like that. Make it a little more interesting with a little something that matters because first downs absolutely do matter, right? The entire game
matter, absolutely.
The entire game, the real life game is based on first downs and touchdowns. That's it. That's
moving the chains.
Yeah, no, but the coaches don't care about. That's the funny part. Coaches don't care about a single other thing besides the first downs and then the touchdowns. So if you want to do a league like that, I'm in. But you got to preposition it that way.
Let's just do a touchdown only league.
Hey,
you only score points for touchdowns and first downs. There's no yardage bonuses or anything like that.
That's a gritty league, dude. That might be able to. There's that contingency of like I hate fantasy football people on Twitter. That might be the way to convert them. Right?
You actually lose a half point for a reception.
They would love that. They would eat. That would finally get them in, dude.
Dude,
Yeah.
I'm going to call this the Kevin Tompkins Invitational, where all running backs who catch passes lose a half point.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. We'll bring those guys in, dude. You get extra. Yeah, and the commissioner hands out extra points for eye test. Whoever looked good that
Whoever
week,
looked
right?
good.
That'll bring
that meme that you put in the GIF you put in in all your articles of Ryan from The Office, who's like,
yeah, it's doing notes. Yeah. Those are the guys those are my favorite guys on Twitter. Yeah, we'll make a league just for those guys. Not much here for the bet on. There's Super Bowl plus 6,500, $100 to win. Nah, you can't. Over under 6.5 wins. Over plus 100. Under minus 120. They have Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett are kind of very similar guys. If you like that,
and I don't think 7 wins is out of the realm of possibility. This one I think is kind of right there on the money for me. I think that Washington does have the ability to beat the Giants. I think that they do have the ability to potentially upset the Cowboys. So, you look at what the rest of their schedule looks like. I don't hate taking the even money here on 7 wins. I really don't hate that.
Yeah, and the thing is, part of it, we're obviously want to win and make money, but we're also trying to have fun. So if you're a Commanders fan out there, Howard Banner is giving you the position. Yeah, both of you Commanders fans. Hey, Howard Banner is giving you permission to bet on the home team, and that's fun, right? Because if the line's there, you might as well have a little fun with it. Couple others here. We're not going to bet on them in the division at plus 1,200. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Emmanuel Forbes, plus 1,800. Anything there?
Not bad. It's not. I mean, I wish he had a better supporting cast around him, but I don't mind Forbes at that. Just if you're throwing a dart and you're sprinkling something out there.
Yeah, the problem with that is that it's betting on corners, unless it's a Sauce Gardner or something, it's almost too random sometimes. Like you need him to have some picks, right, to make some magic. Because if you're, sometimes it's not exciting if unless they're really truly shut down. Looking at the specials on this one, it was pretty much they're all sucker bets on this one. Like I like to throw one out there just to get it out there, but I don't feel good about any of these. How about any Washington player, 12 plus rushing TDs or receiving TDs? So basically, you're betting $100 to win $1,100 if any player scores 12 rushing TDs or receiving TDs. You get it, but the caveat is it has to be 12. It's not 12 rushing plus receiving. They need, Otherwise, Brian Robinson. I mean, you're betting on Brian Robinson.
You're betting on Brian Robinson. That's
or Terry McLaurin.
It.
Yeah,
no interest.
Sucker bets, man. All right, let's wrap this up with the New York Football Giants. And this team, Earn Dog's got the graphic up there. Love it. This team made a ton of moves this offseason, all over the place. This is what happens the second year of a new coach, new front office. They just clean house. You saw it with the Jets. Like, they switched over from 4-3 to 3-4, brought in a ton of guys. This is what this team is doing. The new guys are here. The old contracts are out. So they made a lot of moves. 9-7-1 last year. Best ad, in my opinion, Bobby Okereke. Stealing him from the Colts. That's a rock solid guy on the defensive side, over the middle. Tons of tackles there. Biggest loss, Julian Love. Kind of underrated guy, went to the Seahawks, but they didn't lose too much else unless Saquon Barkley decides to hold out. Best draft pick, in my opinion, I like Jalen Hyatt. And I know you do too, Howard. Guy won a Fred Brolitnikoff winner award for the best wide receiver in college football. They don't just hand those out. So there's something there for sure. 7.5 wins at plus 100, plus 850 to win the NFC East. And then Super Bowl odds plus 6,500. Same Super Bowl odds as the Commanders. So even though the over-under is a little better, the AFC odds are a little better, they're basically saying neither of these teams are winning the big game. That's what those odds are. You heard the RT Sports guy bagging on
Darren Waller.
Darren Waller during the break. Here's what they did this offseason. Signed Bobby Okereke, traded for Darren Waller, signed Paris Campbell, signed Jamison Crowder, drafted Jalen Hyatt. I mean, is there another way? They got Wanda Robinson back from injury, got Sterling Shepard back from injury. Is there any other way this team, is there even another way to add weapons, right? Like they used every possible thing they had, trades, signings, returning from injury, drafting to add weapons. If you're a Giants fan, they didn't leave much on the table. They also drafted cornerback Deontay Banks in the first round, and they drafted offensive guard John Michael Schmitz in the second round. So big moves for the Giants compared to some of these other teams. They are overhauling. But again, they got kind of a lot of redundant assets, in my opinion, at wide receiver. Howard, what do you make of this wide receiver?
That's the big problem, is that they don't have a clear-cut number one. It's one of the reasons why I also love Jalen Hyatt. Not only do I love the fact that the last report I read was that he was only running with the threes, and when they start crapping on a rookie wide receiver, that's immediately the guy who I start flagging as the potential breakout of the year. So I like adding Jalen Hyatt there, but yeah, I mean, listen, Paris Campbell doesn't do much for me. You got Darius Slayton still there. Maybe they're wheeling out Sterling Shepard. There aren't enough weapons on. There's no game-breaking weapon in this wide receiver core. And I think that that's definitely going to be an issue for them. I'm not going to say that they're all interchangeable cogs, but I think Darius Slayton can stretch the field nicely. I think Hyatt can stretch the field nicely. Waller is going to be, I'm sure his route tree looks great and tasty. I'm sure he's going to get leaned on quite a bit. We've just, this is, that was a big pickup for them. So, from a fantasy standpoint, I'm in on Waller 100%. I'm in on Jalen Hyatt 100%. And you know what? And later on in drafts, I know you hate him, but I'll go Isaiah Hodgins. This dude was their number one wide receiver last year, and he came on real strong late in the season, which, yes, I know. The Minnesota game and then the Minnesota game again in the playoffs is really where he kind of, stood out the most, which, listen, that helped me beat the better boss in the championship of the FSGA league last year. But I'm not going to just dismiss Isaiah Hodgins because they didn't bring anybody else in. I'd rather see Hodgins and Slayton and Hyatt as the top three wide receivers, and then you've got Darren Waller. So it is serviceable. These are support guys. These aren't guys that you're picking up and draft, with the exception of Waller. There's not a single Giants receiver who you're picking up to say, this is my wide receiver 3. I'm going to start him week in, week out. These are bye-week fillers who have some potential. So that's kind of where I'm lingering here with the Giants. Give me Saquon Barkley. Maybe I'll look at a Hyatt or a Waller in my draft, depending on where it goes. I know that they're trying to sneak Paris Campbell into that hybrid wide back role too, but I don't know, man. I can't buy it.
I'll tell you. So, and Dustin in the chat is with you. Says Coop doesn't make picks later in drafts. He only has high end picks apparently. Hodgins to the moon. Yes, Dustin. I know that you, unbiased Bills fan, where Hodgins came from, and you also called him being a guy to watch down the stretch. So I know you're on board. I'll admit this, that I do have some draft capital bias. A lot of times I've having a handful of players where I've said, okay, this player was a one-eyed king in the land of the blind where there's just no one else to catch balls, and he's the guy. Amon-Ra St. Brown, an example where looks like I was wrong on that one, right? It looks like he is a good player. Just know, if you believe, you have to truly believe in the talent of Isaiah Hodgins, because it's not just Darius Slayton and Richie James this year. Darren Waller, it's Wan'Dale Robinson, it's Jalen Hyatt. They're only going to have one, maybe two guys that are fantasy relevant outside of Saquon Barkley. If you believe in the guy, then go for it. For me, I look at these ADPs. Barkley's going RB6, Darren Waller tight end 7, Daniel Jones is going QB 14. Then the rest of these guys start with Isaiah Hodgins, wide receiver 67, Campbell 77, Hyatt 82, Robinson 83, Darius Slayton 85, Sterling Shepard like 100 or so. Like, they're all just clumped in there. I have no problem with people picking their guy. I'm just not picking Hodgins. For me, I like Wan'Dale Robinson. I think that he is the most talented guy. That's why he was a second-round pick. We didn't really get to see him because he was hurt. But if you like Isaiah Hodgins, go for it. There's a rule.
You got to stash him, right? I don't think Wan'Dale is going to start. He's not going to start the season on time, right?
Right. But the thing is, there's kind of like there's 4 roles. There's the Darren Waller. There's going to be a guy that's spread out wide, which is like Darren Waller and Isaiah Hodgins potentially mixing and matching that role. There's a slot role, which they got a million guys for that. Paris Campbell, Jamison Crowder, Sterling Shepard. Then there's the flanker role, which could be Jalen Hyatt or Wan'Dale Robinson. And then there's the inline tight end role, so Daniel Bellinger. So there's room for both Isaiah Hodgins and Hyatt to play at the same time. I wonder how many snaps all these guys can have at the same time. That's all. But again, that's a beautiful thing about this ambiguous situation with these guys' ADPs going so late, Howard, in your hometown league. Pick the one you like best. Yeah. And then week 1, open the Fantasy Alarm snap count article. I'll dive in the whole thing and I'll tell you who got the snaps and who ran the routes. And then you add the other guy off the waivers. So it's not that big a deal in your hometown leagues, right? It's not the end of the world if you pick Hodgins because the other guys will all be there.
It's an easy cut too. Like that's the thing. Cut. If you're talking about who you're picking up in the 12th round and beyond, if you have to start a kicker and a defense, and those are 2 of your picks in the late rounds, then you've got guys who you can cut very easily if they don't pan out quick enough. And you look at the snaps, you look at the target share.
Bingo. So, all right, let's wrap this up with some betting on the Giants. We know it's the Quick Out podcast. We get you in, get you out under an hour. After this, stay tuned with us on BSN. So we're going to look at, it's the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Show, new show, me, Howard, and Britt Flynn on that one. So we'll be back for another hour after this. Betting-wise, we're not betting Super Bowl, Howard. 7.5 wins, overs 100, unders minus 120. Where are you at?
I like the over. I mean, this was a 9-win team last year, so I'll take, if you're going to give me plus odds, I'll take the over on their win total. So I don't see a problem with that. I'm not interested in them for the division. I'm not interested in any of their players for MVP. I don't mind Daniel Jones over 3,300 passing yards for even money as well. I think that's a pretty decent bet that you can make, especially if they are going to try and employ a little bit more passing because we don't know about Saquon.
Notorious Daniel Jones doubter myself. I will bet the over on that, Howard. I will bet the over. That's where you know it's a good bet. And if you take, that's the thing. I don't think he's that great of a real life football quarterback. I've made that known. The turnovers are a problem for this guy. But 3,300 yards, if you're getting the over on that and you're getting 700 rushing yards again, I mean, at his ADP, especially in your 2 QB leagues and your 2 to 3 QB drafts, like a RT Sports Best Ball draft, like you can't really miss with that, right? So he feels like a pretty safe pick where he's going.
Yeah, I agree. So
that's it for us. Thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate you hanging out. And if you want to support us, because we always make these podcasts free, we share a lot of free articles, free stuff. Go out and get the NFL draft guide. People always ask me when I answer questions on Twitter, in the DMs, on Reddit, they say, what's the best way to support you? People have even say like, hey, what's your Venmo? Don't Venmo me. Go out and buy a draft guide this year. That's how you support me. That's how you support Howard. Or go and become a full member of Fantasy Alarm. And you can ask us questions every day in the Discord. Use promo code Howard to get 6 months at 50% off. And you get a 7-day free trial. You can pop in, check it out first. But that's the best way to support us, to keep the lights on around here and keep this Fantasy Alarm family intact. Thanks for joining us, guys. Till next time.